My name is Regina Sharp. I'm 34 years old. 2 weeks ago, at my sister's wedding, in front of 200 guests, she demanded the keys to my lake house as her wedding gift. My mother stood beside her and said it out loud. "You work abroad, no husband, no kids. What do you need it for, Regina?" I said no. One word. My mother slapped me. The handprint on my left cheek was visible for an hour. 200 people watched. Caleb's parents watched. The string quartet stopped playing. I didn't raise my hand. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I picked up my clutch, walked to the lobby terrace, made one phone call. What my mother and sister didn't know was this. My father had been waiting 4 years to protect me, and he was about to do it from the grave. Before I go any further, if your chest just tightened the way mine did, please take a second to like and subscribe. It helps this story find the other people who need to hear it. And drop your city and your local time in the comments below. I love knowing where in the world you're sitting tonight while you listen to this. I'm Regina. This is the story of the lie my mother kept for 4 years after my father died, and the one phone call that ended it. Now let me take you back to a morning in Zurich, the week before I flew home. The light in my Zurich apartment came in low and gray that morning. March in Switzerland is rain and stone, and my kitchen window faces a courtyard with one tree. I poured black coffee into my father's old enamel mug, the one he'd given me when I left for college 16 years ago. The handle was chipped. I had never replaced it. On my desk lay a leather notebook, dark brown, soft from handling. My father gave it to me on my 16th birthday with one sentence. "Write down what you see. Don't argue, just notice." I had kept that notebook through every move. Pittsburgh, Boston, Zurich. 3 apartments, 2 breakups, 1 funeral. Inside the front cover was a photograph. My father and me on the dock at the lake house. He was holding a fishing rod. I was 12. He wasn't smiling, but his eyes were. He never smiled in photographs. He said his face wasn't designed for it. The voicemail from the night before played in my head. My mother's voice, brisk, almost cheerful. "Regina, just sign the lake house over to your sister already. You're never even on this continent. It's the kind thing to do. Call me." I closed the notebook. I needed to talk about my family before I tell you the rest. My sister Vanessa was born 5 years after me. From the day she came home from the hospital, my mother held her like she had finally been given the right thing. I do not remember being held. I remember watching. Vanessa grew up loud. She practiced laughs in the mirror. She tagged every Instagram post with 3 hashtags exactly. No more, no less. She told strangers at parties what she wanted them to think of her. And then she became that. I was the other one. The one who noticed. My father saw both of us. He didn't intervene. He didn't take sides out loud. He watched my mother choose Vanessa over me at every birthday, every dinner, every Christmas. And he watched me not protest. One evening when I was 12, Vanessa took the necklace my grandmother had left me, wore it to school, said she'd asked permission. She hadn't. My mother backed her up. "She's your sister. You share. Don't be selfish." That night, my father came to my room. He sat at the foot of my bed. He looked at the carpet for a full minute before he spoke. "Diane lies the way other people breathe," he said. "Watch for it." He left. He didn't say anything else. I did not understand it then. I thought he was angry about the necklace. Vanessa got engaged in May of last year to Caleb Hartwell. His family was old Connecticut money, the kind that owned things before there were stocks. The Hartwells had a house in Greenwich, and a name that opened doors at country clubs that had been closed for a century. My mother told me about the engagement on the phone. She used a voice I hadn't heard since she'd been promoted at the dental practice. "Caleb's family is significant, Regina. We need to make sure Vanessa shows well. I muted the family group chat that night. I had done it years before, but I checked again to be sure. Notifications off. Lock screen quiet. Within a month, I started seeing the phrase Vermont property appear in messages I read but did not open. My cousin Marta texted me directly. Vanessa says you guys are figuring out the lake house for the wedding. Cute. I did not respond. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself Diane had always overtalked about real estate. I told myself it would pass. In September, Vanessa called me from her car on a Boston freeway. She was glowing the way she always glowed when she wanted something. Reg, can we talk honeymoon? We were thinking the lake house for 2 weeks. You barely use it. It would mean everything to us. I said, I'll think about it. I hung up. I did not think about it. In December, my mother called me directly. No preamble. Regina, just sign the lake house over to your sister. You don't need it. You're not on this continent. Caleb's family expects her to bring something. Stop being stubborn about real estate, sweetheart. I hung up that call too. I opened the leather notebook for the first time in years. I read past page 1. The pages I had never read had my father's handwriting in tight, careful lines. Dates, observations, names. 2 columns on every page. Left column, what Diane said. Right column, what Diane did. I read until 2 in the morning. I should have known then, but I didn't yet know what he meant. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday in November of 2021. My father called me at 6 in the morning, Zurich time. His voice was the same as it had always been. Steady. He said the word pancreatic, and then he said stage 4, and then he said, I'm sorry to wake you, but I wanted to be the one to tell you. I was on a flight to JFK within 36 hours. My team at Helvetica Capital Partners covered for me. My director, an Austrian woman named Brigitte, said only, come back when you come back. Don't think about us. I walked into the house in Albany on a Saturday afternoon, and he was in his recliner. Smaller than 3 months before. His engineer's hands resting on the chair arms. He still wore his work watch. He hadn't worked in 7 years. He wore it anyway. He looked up at me when I came in. He looked tired. He looked like himself. You came fast. I sat down on the ottoman in front of his chair. We didn't talk about the diagnosis that first day. We talked about a leak in the kitchen sink. He told me which valve to turn off in the basement. He told me the part number for the washer. I wrote it down on a paper napkin. That was how he loved us. Through instructions. He didn't tell me what he was already doing in private. I took 6 weeks of unpaid leave. I moved into my parents' guest room. My mother had repainted it the year before. Pale yellow. She had hung a picture of a beach we'd never been to. Hospice care started in early December. A nurse came twice a day. A woman named Carla. She was kind. She had a Boston accent and a heavy keychain. My father's bedroom became a small island of routines. Pain medication every 4 hours. Bone broth from a thermos. The window cracked open even in winter because he wanted to hear the birds. One morning in mid-December, he asked me to drive an envelope to Howard Bennett's office downtown. He gave it to me from the inside pocket of his bathrobe. It was sealed with red wax. His initials pressed into the wax. HB on the front in his careful printing. Don't open it, he said. Hand it to Howard yourself. Tell him I said thank you. I drove the 20 minutes downtown. The streets had a thin layer of new snow. Bennett and Carroll was in an old stone building on Washington Avenue. The secretary buzzed me through. Howard came to the door himself. He looked at me carefully. He didn't ask questions. He took the envelope. He thanked me. He said one thing as I was leaving. Your father is a deeply careful man, Regina. Tell him I'll handle this today. I drove home. I told my father I'd handed it to Howard. He nodded. He went back to sleep. I didn't ask what was in the envelope. I should have. In early January, my father asked me to drive a second envelope to Howard Bennett. This one was thicker, sealed the same way, same red wax, same HB on the front. Same instructions, he said. Hand it to Howard. Don't open it. I drove downtown. Howard was at the front door before I parked. He took the envelope. He held it for a moment. He said, "Tell your father everything is in order." I drove home. I told my father. He closed his eyes. He nodded once. He said, "Good. That's done." I asked him what was done. He said, "Nothing you need to worry about. Make sure you eat something. You're too thin." I made him soup. I didn't ask again. In late March, 3 weeks before he died, my father asked me to drive him up to the lake house one last time. Carla, the hospice nurse, said no. She said it firmly. She said his pain levels were too high. My father waited until she left. Then he asked me again. He said, "Regina, I am going. With you, or with the next person who walks through the door. You decide which one you want it to be." I packed his medications in a small zippered bag. I drove him in his old Buick. The drive was 3 hours. He slept for most of it. We arrived at noon. The lake was still half frozen. The light was clear and cold and very sharp. I helped him out of the car. He walked to the dock under his own weight, one hand on my elbow. We sat side by side on the bench at the end of the dock. He wore his heavy wool coat and the wool hat my mother had knitted him in 1998. We didn't speak for a long time. He looked at the water. He watched a single goose land on the ice and walk in 3 slow circles. Then he reached into his coat pocket and put a small brass key on a leather fob into my hand. The fob was old leather, the brass dulled by handling. "This is for the safe in my bedroom closet, inside the back wall behind the shoe rack. Diane doesn't know about that safe. She thinks I had the wall reinforced for insurance reasons. I had it built 5 years ago. The combination is your birth month and your birth year, reversed." I looked at him. "What's in the safe?" "What you need, when you need it. Don't open it before then. You'll know when." "Okay." He closed my hand around the key. He said, "Don't tell your mother about the safe. Don't tell Vanessa. Not until you need to." "I won't." He sat for another long minute. Then he said, "I want you to remember something. The dock. This bench. The way the light is on the water right now." "I'll remember." "Good." We sat for another hour. The cold sharpened. He shivered. I helped him back to the car. We drove back to Albany. I tucked the brass key into the back pocket of my notebook. I forgot about it. He died on April 9th, just past dawn. Carla was there. My mother was there. Vanessa was there. I was there. He had not spoken in his last 12 hours. He squeezed my right hand once. I held his hand for 40 minutes after. The funeral was the following Saturday. 200 people came. He had been at GE in Schenectady for 38 years. Engineers came from 3 states. Old colleagues stood in the back wearing the same kind of dark suit. I flew back to Zurich the next day. Within 48 hours of the burial, my mother had started a small shift in language. The lake house, in her conversation, became Gerald's house, then our place, then, by the end of the first summer, the family's lake house. Vanessa picked up the rhythm fast. She always did. And the lie began. I didn't even notice when. That first summer after he died, my mother and Vanessa stayed at the lake house for 2 weeks. They posted 17 photos. They tagged me in 9 of them. The caption said, "Family time at our place. Missing Gerald, but he'd want this." I saw the post from Zurich at 3 in the morning. I could not sleep. I said nothing. It was the first time I noticed the word "our." The second time was in a Christmas card my mother sent that December. She had pre-printed cards with a family photo. The caption under the photo read, "From the Sharps at our Vermont retreat." The third time was at Easter the following year. My Aunt Marjorie, my father's older sister, called me from Florida. She had received a phone call from my mother. She said, "Reggie, honey, your mom told me she and Vanessa are figuring out summer schedules at the lake house. I thought you owned that place outright. Did something change?" I said, "Aunt Marjorie, nothing changed. Mom is just talking. Don't worry about it." She said, "Are you sure?" I said, "I'm sure." I hung up. I sat in my apartment for an hour without moving. In 2023, the rewrite accelerated. My mother began telling neighbors that the lake house had been purchased by both of us together over the years. When she repeated it enough, in enough rooms, it became almost true to her. Vanessa added her own layer. In group chats with cousins, she'd write, "We need to plan our summer at the lake." Always we, always our. She started referring to it on Instagram as the family compound. Compound. That was the word she used. I noticed it from Zurich. I said nothing. I was working 60-hour weeks at Helvetica that year. We had a major regulatory audit. I told myself I would deal with my family after the audit. The audit ended. I did not deal with my family. In 2024, 3 years after my father died, my mother called me with a casual proposal. "Regina, what would you think about transferring the lake house deed to a joint title? You, me, and Vanessa. Just for ease. So we can all use it without paperwork. Caleb's family might want to visit if it's clearly family property." I said, "No, Mom." I waited for the push. She didn't push. She dropped it that fast. The dropping was its own information. But the following weekend, at a family barbecue at my cousin's house in Saratoga Springs, she introduced the lake house to a neighbor as the one Gerald wanted Vanessa to have someday, for when she settles down. I was sitting 4 feet away. I didn't move. I didn't correct her. The neighbor, a retired surgeon named Dr. Halloran, looked from my mother to me. He'd known my father. He knew the lake house belonged to me. His face flickered. He turned back to my mother. He said slowly, "That's a beautiful sentiment, Diane." He walked away from the conversation. 20 minutes later, on his way to the parking lot, he stopped by my chair and said quietly, "Regina, your father told me about the lake house in 2021. I just want you to know I remember." I thanked him. I told him I was fine. I waited until 8 in the evening and I drove to the airport 4 hours early. I sat in the international terminal at Albany Airport eating airport pizza. I told myself I'd left because of scheduling. It wasn't scheduling. I'd been doing this for almost 3 years, hearing the rewrite, watching the rewrite, letting the rewrite stand. Some part of me had decided, in the haze of grief, that it was easier to let my mother build her story than to argue. My father was gone. He couldn't be hurt. The lake house was just property. Property is not a hill to die on. Except it wasn't just property. I just hadn't realized that yet. January 2026. I'd flown home for a delayed Christmas. 3 days at my mother's house in Albany. 3 days too many. My mother had insisted on cooking every meal. She had cornered me in the laundry room on day 2 and said, "Regina, you really need to settle this lake house thing before the wedding. The Hartwells will ask." I didn't answer. I went upstairs and packed an overnight bag. On day 4, I told her I needed 2 nights at the lake house. Some quiet, some breathing. She did not like it. She let it pass. She did not offer to come. I drove the 3 hours up alone. The lake house was cold and empty. The heat took an hour to warm the bedrooms. I built a fire in the wood stove. I made soup from a can. I sat on the dock at sunset and tried to remember my father's exact face. I couldn't quite. The next morning, I needed to find an insurance binder. I remembered him storing it in the floor safe in the master bedroom closet. The safe behind the back wall, behind the shoe rack. I went to the closet. I moved the shoe rack aside. The wall behind it was painted white. There was a hairline seam. I knelt down. I pulled the brass key out of my notebook for the first time in 3 years. I pressed the hidden panel. It popped open. The safe was behind it, recessed into the studs. A standard small floor safe with a numeric keypad and a key slot. I entered the combination. My birth month and birth year, reversed. The keypad beeped. I turned the key. The safe door swung open. Inside, behind the binder, sat two things. A thick envelope sealed with red wax. The initials HB pressed in, identical to the ones I'd delivered for him, and a folded letter on his stationery, unsealed, with my name in his careful printing on the front. Until I opened the safe, I had been a daughter who let things slide. After I opened the safe, I was not that daughter anymore. If you've ever sat in a family that rewrites your father's words after he's gone and watched everyone go along with it because it's easier, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. I read them. I sat on the floor of the bedroom closet. The carpet under my knees was older than my sister. I held the unsealed letter in my hands and I read the first paragraph. Regina, if you're reading this, it means your mother has tried something. I'm sorry. I didn't want to leave you this. But I needed to leave you protected, and the only way I knew how was to make sure the truth was somewhere she couldn't reach. I stopped reading. I closed the letter. I held it against my chest for a moment. I stood up. I walked out of the bedroom, through the kitchen, out the back door, down the gravel path to the dock. The morning sun was on the water. Cold air. No wind. The lake was glass. I sat with my legs hanging over the edge of the dock, the same spot where my father had handed me the brass key 3 years before. I opened the wax-sealed envelope carefully with my thumbnail. The wax cracked clean. Inside was a multi-page document, paper-clipped, printed on heavy stock. The cover sheet was titled, Sharp Family Revocable Trust, Amended and Restated, December 14th, 2021. I read only 3 pages. The cover sheet, the schedule of assets, the beneficiary line. The schedule listed one asset, real property at Lake Champlain, Charlotte, Vermont. Deed previously held in the name of Gerald A. Sharp, transferred into trust on December 14th, 2021. Source of funds, Sharp Personal Retirement Supplement Account, established 1981, never commingled. The beneficiary line read, Upon settler's death, said property shall pass in full to Regina Margaret Sharp, daughter, as sole beneficiary, free of any claim by spouse or any other heir. Trustee, Howard Bennett, Esquire, Bennett and Carroll, Albany, New York. I read it once. I read it twice. I read it a third time. There was a fourth name on page 3. A witness signature line. Dr. James Halloran, retired surgeon. The same neighbor who had stopped by my chair in Saratoga. Howard. The man I'd handed the wax-sealed envelope to in the winter of my father's last months. The man who had said, Your father is a deeply careful man. I'd carried that envelope to him. I had carried this. I had been part of this. And I hadn't known. I sat on the dock for a long time without moving. I began counting backward. April 2022. May, June, July. The first photos of our place. Aunt Marjorie's phone call. The first Christmas card. The phone call about the joint deed. The Saratoga barbecue. Halloran's quiet sentence about remembering. The December voicemail. Vanessa's engagement. The casual mentions of Vermont property. My mother's instruction to just sign it over. 4 years. 4 years of being told in 100 small ways that my father's wishes were something other than what he had actually written down on December 14th of 2021. I went very still. I drove back to Albany that afternoon. I locked the documents in the trunk of my rental car. I did not tell my mother what I'd found. I sat at her dinner table that night and let her tell me about the wedding plans. I nodded. I asked about the flowers. I asked about the seating chart. I asked about the menu. She said, I told the planner we'd want extra centerpieces for the head table. Caleb's mother is particular. That's nice, Mom. Have you thought any more about the lake house, Regina? I'm thinking about it. She brightened. Good. That's all I ask. That you think about it. She topped up my wine glass. In my hotel room that night, I photographed every page of the trust. I photographed both sides of my father's letter. I emailed the photos to myself in 3 separate accounts. I uploaded the photos to 2 encrypted cloud folders. I burned them onto a small flash drive. I opened the leather notebook to verify something. I flipped through the entries by date. On a page dated December 13th, 2021, the day before the trust was signed, my father had written one sentence. Halloran agreed to witness. Good man. I stared at the line. He had named the witness in his own notebook a year before I would ever need to know. He had documented everything. Every conversation, every signature, every step. I closed the notebook and slept 4 hours. The next morning, I called Aunt Marjorie in Florida. I told her I was looking into something quietly and asked her to keep our conversation confidential. I asked, when Mom called you about the lake house, what was the date? She paused. I keep a call log. Old habit. Hold on. I heard pages turning. August 12th, 2022. She called me at 10 in the morning. She said Vanessa was going to need that property eventually, and could I please not bring it up when I talk to you? I thanked her. She said, Reggie, is your mother in trouble? I said, I'll let you know. I flew back to Zurich on January 12th. I did not say goodbye in person. I left a note in the kitchen. For 3 weeks, I did nothing visible. I went to work. I went to the gym. I cooked dinner at home. I let the information sit in my body until it stopped feeling like a fire and started feeling like a fact. On the morning of February 2nd, I wrote Howard Bennett an email. 6 words. I found what my father left me. Can we talk? He answered within an hour. 2 sentences. We need to talk in person. I have been waiting. I bought a ticket to Albany for the next weekend. There was a name I needed to call. I bought the ticket. Howard Bennett met me at the front door of Bennett and Carroll on a Saturday morning in mid-February. The office was on a quiet block of Washington Avenue. The building was 3 stories of 19th-century stone. Howard was 68 years old. He wore a navy suit. He had white hair, cut short. He had a slight stoop in his right shoulder. He shook my hand. He poured me coffee in his office, from a glass carafe on a sideboard, the way I remembered him doing in 2021. He didn't sit until I sat. Before I had taken a sip, he said one thing. Your father told me to wait until you came to me. So I waited. How long have you been waiting? 4 years and 10 months. I set the coffee down. Show me everything. Start from the beginning. Howard opened a thick file from the credenza behind his desk. The file had 4 tabs. Older paper on the left, newer paper on the right. Everything dated. Everything cross-referenced. He walked me through the trust step by step. He showed me my father's intake notes from November 30th, 2021, 11 days after the diagnosis. He showed me capacity attestation forms signed by 2 witnesses on December 14th, 2021, Dr. James Halloran, and a man named Walter Pinsky, my father's old colleague from GE, also still living, also willing to testify. He showed me the original deed transfer from Gerald Sharp, individual, to Sharp Family Revocable Trust, dated December 14th, 2021, filed with the Chittenden County Recorder of Deeds in Vermont on December 21st, 2021. He showed me the source of funds documentation. My father's personal retirement supplement account originated 1981 at a different bank than the joint family accounts, with statements going back 40 years. He had never touched the marital savings. The lake house had been paid for, every dollar of it, from money he had saved separately his entire adult life. I asked who knew. Only your father, me, Dr. Halloran, and Mr. Pinsky. None of the witnesses ever met your mother socially. Your father chose them for that reason. I asked what my mother had done. Howard turned to a different tab. Tab 3. On May 11th, 2022, 1 month after your father's funeral, your mother arrived at this office without an appointment. She walked past my secretary. My secretary called my desk twice. Your mother said she would not leave until I saw her. She sat in the chair where you are sitting now. He read from his own contemporaneous notes, written that same morning. Quote, "You need to destroy that updated document, Howard. It will tear the family apart." Gerald wasn't himself when he signed it. He was on morphine. The original 2018 will is what he really wanted. I'm asking you, as the family's attorney, to do what's right. End quote. I responded that I was not the family's attorney, that I had been Gerald's personal attorney, that the trust had been signed before any hospice morphine prescription was filled, and that I would not destroy any document. She left at 10:31 in the morning. My secretary witnessed her exit. I asked if there was a recording. He turned the page. 4 days later, on May 15th, 2022, your mother left a voicemail on the firm's main line at 4:18 in the afternoon. The voicemail system preserves all messages for the full retention period. I have not deleted it. He picked up his desk phone, dialed an internal code, put the call on speaker. I heard my mother's voice. 4 years younger, brisk, almost cheerful. "Howard, this is Diane Sharp. I need you to destroy that updated document. It will tear the family apart. Gerald wasn't thinking clearly when he made it. Please, just destroy it. Call me back." The voicemail ended. Howard hung up. The room was very quiet. He said, "I returned her call on May 17th. I told her again that I would not destroy the document. I told her any further attempts to solicit me to alter or destroy the trust would be documented and reported. She did not call again." I asked Howard for a copy of the voicemail file. He said it had already been exported to a digital file and was waiting for me on a flash drive. He handed me the flash drive in a small padded envelope. I asked Howard what my options were. He laid them out without bias. I could file the trust documents formally with the county recorder in Vermont, which would put the lake house's chain of title beyond any dispute publicly. I could send my mother a registered letter through Howard's office explaining the situation. I could confront her privately. I could wait. I could pursue criminal referral on the May 2022 solicitation, which in New York could be charged under tampering statutes, though Howard said he would not file unless I asked. He said, "Whatever you choose, I'll act when you call me." I asked one more question. "Has anyone else from the family ever contacted you?" Howard paused. He pulled a thin folder from the bottom of the credenza. "Your sister called this office twice, both times in 2024. The first call was on March 8, 2024. She asked my secretary whether there was any trust document related to the lake property. My secretary told her, per protocol, that we could not discuss client matters. The second call was on October 2nd, 2024. She asked the same question in different words. She said, quote, 'I just want to make sure my mother and I aren't going to be surprised by anything when my sister decides to be selfish.' End quote. My secretary noted the call. Your sister never called again." I looked at him. Vanessa knew there might be a document. She suspected. She did not know. And my mother knew. She knew there was a document. She knew its contents. And she chose to build a 4-year story over the top of it. Yes, the evidence supports that. I sat with that for a moment. I took out my father's leather notebook. I opened to a blank page. I wrote one date. March 21st. Howard looked at the date. Vanessa's wedding. Yes. He nodded once. He didn't argue. He didn't advise. He didn't ask why. He said, "Call me on the day. I'll be near." I closed the notebook. I had everything I needed. Now I just had to wait. I flew back to Zurich on the Sunday evening flight. I slept on the plane for the first time in months. I unpacked at home and made dinner and did dishes and folded laundry. Routine things. I needed routine. That night, late, I sat at my kitchen table with my father's letter spread flat in front of me. I read it from the first word to the last. 2 pages. Both sides. His careful printing. The kind of penmanship engineers have. Each letter precise. Each margin even. He wrote about seeing the dynamic. He apologized for not protecting me sooner. He said he had been a careful man, a watchful man, a quiet man. He said he had decided in November of 2021, the night after his diagnosis, that watching was no longer enough. He explained the lake house. He wrote that he had bought it in the summer of 2018, using money from a retirement supplement account he had kept separate from marital savings for 40 years. Money he had set aside, dollar by dollar, decade by decade, because he had wanted to leave one thing for the daughter who never asked for anything. He wrote about me, the way I noticed, the way I didn't argue, the way I had carried things for the family without ever being thanked. He wrote, "Regina, you are the daughter who never asked for anything, so I'm asking on your behalf. Take what is yours. Build a life that is yours. And when you need me, look at the water. I'll be watching." He signed it, "Watching. Always, Dad." I read it 3 times. Then I cried for 2 hours. Then I stopped. The next morning, I went back through the leather notebook, page by page. Every page my father had ever written in, which I'd never bothered to read past the first one. The pages were full of observations, dated, quiet, the kind of notes an engineer would take. October 1997. Diane introduced Vanessa to a neighbor as the smart one. Regina was at the same table. March 2003. Diane gave Vanessa the necklace Regina had been promised. Regina didn't speak. Watch this pattern. Decide whether to address. July 2010. Regina won an award at school. Diane skipped the assembly to take Vanessa shopping. Regina said nothing on the drive home. December 2018. Lake house purchased. Tell no one for now. Title in my name only. Funded from supplement account. Diane assumes joint. November 2021. Diagnosis: pancreatic stage 4, 6 to 8 months. Time to act on the lake house question. December 14th, 2021. Trust signed at Howard's office. Halloran and Pinsky witnessed. Documents secured. Regina does not yet know. She will when she needs to. January 2022. Letter for Regina drafted. Placed in safe. Key given soon. He had been documenting for 30 years. He had seen it long before I had. I sat with a notebook in my lap until the sun came up over the rooftops. Then I made a decision. I thought about doing it quietly. I could have. I could have filed the trust documents at the county recorder, sent my mother a registered letter explaining that her 4-year narrative had been incorrect, and let her absorb the news in her kitchen with the door closed. A private retraction would have protected my mother. It would have protected Vanessa. But there was something more I needed to understand before I made the choice. I called my cousin Marta on a Saturday afternoon. Marta worked in Boston as a corporate attorney. She was Vanessa's age. She had been at the engagement party in Greenwich. I asked her casually, "Marta, do you know anything about Vanessa's prenup setup with the Hartwells? Has anyone mentioned it to you?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Regina, I should not be telling you this. Tell me." "There's a side asset declaration. Vanessa listed the Vermont lake house as one of her contributed assets at 1.6 million. The Hartwells structured a matching contribution to her side. The whole thing is contingent on the truth of her declarations. I let the silence sit. Marta said, I assumed you knew. I assumed there was an arrangement. There is no arrangement. The silence on her end was different now. She said, Regina, that's fraud. I know. That's not just family drama, that's actionable misrepresentation in a marital contract. The Hartwells' attorneys will unwind the entire structure if they find out. I know, she said. What are you going to do? I said, I'm going to let her show them herself. I chose the truth. Not quietly, not in private, where everyone who needed to see it could see it at once. I called Howard on February 26th. I asked him one question. Will you come if I call you on the 21st of March? There was a pause on the line. He said, I'll be in Cooperstown that morning. I'll wait at a coffee shop 2 blocks from the resort. You call me when you want me in the room, not before. Thank you. Regina. Yes. Your father would have wanted to be there, so I'll be there for him. I hung up. That evening, I called Dr. Halloran in Saratoga Springs. He answered on the 3rd ring. I told him who I was. He said, I know who you are, Regina. I asked him whether he remembered the December 2021 witnessing. He said, I remember it like it was last week. Your father had me drive up to Howard's office on a snowy Tuesday. He was thin, but his mind was clear. He read every page of the trust out loud. He signed in front of me and Walter Pinsky. He asked us both whether we believed he was acting under undue influence or coercion. We both said no. We signed. I asked, would you be willing to testify to those facts if needed? He said, I'd be willing to drive to Albany tomorrow if it came to it. Your father was a friend. I thanked him. He said, Regina, take care of yourself. I hung up. She had no idea what was waiting for her at her own wedding. In early March, I flew to Boston for what my mother had called a pre-wedding sister breakfast. It was at a brunch place in the South End. Vanessa had organized it. 3 of her bridesmaids were there, 2 cousins, my mother, me. The conversation was about flowers and seating charts. I listened. I ate eggs. I drank black coffee. My mother kept touching her pearl necklace. She did it whenever Vanessa told a story about Caleb's family. After 90 minutes, Vanessa announced she had to leave for a fitting. The group broke up. 2 of the bridesmaids invited me for coffee around the corner. They were friendly. One of them, a junior associate at a Boston law firm named Olivia, was already 2 drinks in from breakfast mimosas. We sat in a back booth at a coffee shop on Tremont Street. Olivia leaned across the table. I just want to say, Regina, you're so generous with the lake house thing. So generous. I smiled. I tilted my head. Tell me more what you mean. Olivia waved her hand. Vanessa told us. The side agreement. The Hartwells are matching her contributed assets. The lake house is the big one. You're really making this whole marriage work for her. The other bridesmaid, a redhead named Bryn, kicked her under the table. Olivia waved her off. Oh, come on, it's family. Regina knows. I kept smiling. Of course, I'm just glad it's all coming together. When did Vanessa work all that out? I want to make sure I have my timing right for the paperwork. Olivia, helpfully. August. Last August. The Hartwells' attorneys insisted on the side declaration before they would proceed with the prenup. Vanessa signed her contributed assets list at their office in Hartford. She told us the value she put on the lake house was based on a recent appraisal her mother had done. I let the words settle in my head. I asked, did Vanessa mention how my mother got an appraisal? Olivia shrugged. Some local appraiser in Vermont. Diane handled it. Vanessa said her mom is good at logistics. Bryn, more carefully now. Regina. Are you okay with all of this? I said, I'm fine. I want to make sure my sister has everything she needs. I paid for everyone's coffee. I tipped 25%. I walked to my hotel. In my room, I pieced the rest of it together. The Hartwells had structured a matching contribution arrangement. Vanessa listed assets, including the lake house at $1.6 million, valued by an appraisal my mother had quietly arranged. The Hartwells matched. The agreement, a side document attached to the main prenuptial framework, was contingent on the truth of Vanessa's declarations. My mother had not just allowed the fraud, she had facilitated it. She had commissioned the appraisal. I sat at the hotel desk for a long time. I called Howard from the hotel room phone. I told him about the appraisal. He took notes. He said he would have his paralegal contact the Vermont assessor's office Monday morning to find out which licensed appraiser had been hired and when. Within 4 hours of my call, he texted me one line. Located the appraiser. He'll provide records on request. Diane's name is on the engagement letter. I sat with that. My mother's name. On an engagement letter for a property she did not own. Tied to her daughter's marriage contract. I wasn't going to expose Vanessa. I was going to let Vanessa expose herself. I flew to JFK on the morning of March 19th. Rented a car at the airport. Drove the 4 hours to Cooperstown. Checked into the Otesaga Resort Hotel under my own name. Ordered a salad in my room. Read for 2 hours. That night, I walked the resort grounds. The lake was dark. The wind was sharp. I stood at the edge of the water for 10 minutes. I went back to my room. I slept 7 hours. It was the best sleep I'd had in 4 years. The wedding was on Saturday, March 21st. I came down to breakfast at 9. My mother saw me at the buffet. She came over. She hugged me stiffly. She held me at arm's length. Regina, that dress. A little plain for a wedding, but it suits you, darling. The dress was navy silk, knee-length. Simple lines. My father had liked navy. Thank you, Mom. Vanessa appeared in the doorway. She saw me. She came over. She kissed both my cheeks. She laughed her practiced laugh. Big day. Big day. You ready, Reg? I'm ready. Good. Because I have so many things to ask you about later. She winked. I poured coffee. Caleb passed through the dining room with his father. He nodded at me politely. He was adjusting his cufflinks. His mother arrived at the resort at 1 o'clock. I saw her come in through the lobby. Pearl earrings, cream-colored suit. She kissed my mother on the cheek. She did not see me yet. I watched everyone from a small chair near the lobby fireplace. At 3 o'clock I went to the ceremony. At 4 o'clock Vanessa was married. At 5:30 I walked into the ballroom. The ballroom of the Otesaga was lit warm. White tablecloths, crystal centerpieces, 200 guests. A string quartet in the corner playing something light. Trays of champagne moving through the crowd. The smell of lilies and warm bread. The Hartwells were clustered near a tall window on the south wall. Caleb's mother in her cream suit and pearl earrings. Caleb's father in dark gray. Caleb between them, adjusting his cufflinks again. My mother stood near the entrance, performing greeter duties she had not been assigned. Navy mother of the bride dress. Her pearl necklace. The one she touched when she lied. She was touching it now. Vanessa worked the room. Each table got the same hand-on-shoulder, head tilt, practiced laugh. The dress was ivory satin with a 4-foot train. I stood near the bar. I took a sparkling water. I did not drink. Vanessa saw me. She walked toward me with that laugh already in motion. She angled us so we were facing the cluster of Hartwell parents and 3 of her bridesmaids and a small group of cousins. About 15 people directly in earshot, another 60 within hearing range. She raised her voice slightly, not a shout, just enough. Regina, before the speeches, I want to make this official. I want you to give me the keys to the lake house, today, in front of everyone, as your wedding gift to me. Several guests turned. The Hartwell mother's head came up. Her husband stopped mid-sentence with a guest from Greenwich. I said, "Vanessa, this is not the right moment. It's the perfect moment. Caleb's family is here. They should see we share things in this family. We can talk about this on Monday." Vanessa laughed. Her practiced laugh. "Monday you'll be on a plane back to Switzerland and we'll be on our honeymoon. So today, please." My mother saw the moment and stepped in. She put her hand on Vanessa's back. She raised her voice to match. "Vanessa's right, sweetheart. You work abroad. No husband, no kids. What do you need it for? Just hand the keys over. Make this a happy day for your sister." I said, "Mom, stop." She didn't stop. "Don't make a scene, Regina. Just give her the keys. We've discussed this for months. You know what your father would have wanted." "Mom, you don't know what my father would have wanted." "Don't tell me what I know." The room's attention was now on us. Maybe 60 heads? Then 80. The string quartet kept playing for another half measure and then trailed off as the cellist looked up and saw what was happening. Every face had turned to me. I held my small navy clutch in my left hand. My right hand was at my side. My breathing was even. "No," I said. One word. Vanessa's smile tightened. The performance briefly slipped. "Regina, don't do this to me on my wedding day." "I'm not doing anything to you, Vanessa." My mother said more loudly. "Regina, don't be selfish. Your father would have wanted this. He always said family comes first." The room was quiet now. 200 people were quiet. Even the servers had stopped moving. I kept my voice flat. I kept my eyes on my mother. "My father wanted exactly what is written in his will, Mom. Which you and I both know is not what you've been telling everyone for the last 4 years." My mother's face changed. It changed in stages. First confusion. Then the recognition that I knew. Then the older, harder thing underneath. Her hand came up, and she slapped me. The sound carried across the ballroom, a clean, sharp crack. The string quartet stopped playing in the middle of a measure. The handprint bloomed on my left cheek. Hot, immediate, visible from across the room. I did not raise my hand to my face. I did not flinch. I did not look at the floor. I turned my head back, slowly, until I was looking at my mother again. I looked her in the eye for 3 full seconds. Vanessa, behind her, made a small sound. Like a small animal. Caleb's mother had a hand on her husband's arm. Her face was very still. She was looking at my mother. She was not looking at me. I picked up my clutch from where it had dropped onto the floor at my feet. I walked through the cluster of guests, past 3 bridesmaids, past a cousin, past the bartender who was holding a champagne flute frozen in mid-pour, out of the ballroom, through the double doors, across the lobby, past the maitre d', who stepped back without speaking, onto the terrace. The terrace was empty. The March air was 20 degrees colder than the ballroom. The cold on my left cheek was the only thing keeping me steady. I opened my clutch. I took out my phone. My hand was shaking slightly. I steadied it against the railing. I dialed Howard. The phone rang twice. He picked up. I said one word. "Now." He said, 8 minutes. I hung up. I stood on the terrace for another 2 minutes. I breathed in cold air. I straightened my dress. I touched my hair once. I did not look at my cheek. I walked back inside. I crossed the lobby. I entered the ballroom through the side door. I walked to my assigned table at the head section. Table 2. I sat down between an older Hartwell cousin and an empty chair where my father would have been. The maitre d' had quietly signaled the kitchen. The first course was being served. Tomato bisque. The servers moved through the room without speaking. My mother had returned to her seat at the head table. She was not eating. Her hands were folded in her lap. Vanessa had been reseated next to Caleb. Caleb was looking at the table. The Hartwell parents had returned to their table. Caleb's mother was watching me. I did not look at her directly. I picked up my spoon. The handprint on my cheek was still warm. I ate 2 bites of soup. I set the spoon down. I placed my napkin in my lap. The older Hartwell cousin next to me leaned slightly. She said, very quietly, "Are you all right, dear?" I said, "I will be." She said, "I have a friend who is a family lawyer in Hartford. If you need a name later, I'll give you one." I said, "Thank you." She did not say anything else. The second course came. Roasted halibut. I did not eat it. I cut it into pieces. I rearranged the pieces. I drank water. My mother, across the room, picked at her plate. Once, she looked up at me. I did not look back. Vanessa was crying quietly into her napkin. Caleb had moved his chair half an inch away from hers. He was looking at the tablecloth. The Hartwell mother had not picked up her fork. A toast started. A Hartwell uncle stood. He gave a short, polite speech. He raised his glass. About a third of the room raised their glasses. The other 2/3 did not. The uncle sat down quickly. The maitre d' approached my table. He bent down and said quietly, "Miss Sharp, a gentleman has arrived in the lobby asking to speak briefly to the room. He says you are expecting him." I said, "Bring him in. Make space at the head table." He nodded once and left. I waited. An hour. That's all it took. At 6:50 in the evening, the main doors of the ballroom opened. Howard Bennett walked in. Navy suit. Leather portfolio under his right arm. White hair neat. 68 years old. He walked the way he had walked into his own office 5 weeks before. Steady. Unhurried. The resort coordinator, whom I had briefed at the door earlier that afternoon, walked half a step ahead of him. I stood. Howard reached the floor in front of the head table. He set his portfolio down on the corner of the table. He turned to face the room. 200 people went quiet. He spoke. "Good evening. My name is Howard Bennett. I was Gerald Sharp's attorney and personal friend for 25 years. I am the trustee of his estate. I would not have come to this wedding uninvited unless it was necessary. It is necessary." My mother half stood from her chair at the head table. "Howard, this isn't the time. This isn't appropriate." Howard, mildly, without turning toward her. "I'm afraid, Diane, it is." She sat down. She did not look at Vanessa. Her hand went to her pearl necklace. Howard opened the portfolio. He took out a stapled document. He held it up so the room could see the cover sheet. "This is the Sharp Family Revocable Trust. It was executed on December 14th, 2021, in my office, in front of 2 witnesses still residing in New York State. It was signed by Gerald Sharp while of sound mind, 11 days before any hospice morphine prescription was filled. Capacity is documented in my contemporaneous notes, also in this file." He turned a page. "The trust transfers ownership of the lake property at Lake Champlain, Vermont, into a revocable trust. The property was purchased in 2018 entirely from funds in Gerald Sharp's personal retirement supplement account, established in 1981. Never commingled with marital assets. Upon settler's death, the property passes to a single named beneficiary." He read the next line slowly. "Sole beneficiary, Regina Margaret Sharp. No other party named, no spousal claim attached." Vanessa stood up at the head table. That can't be right. That isn't what Mom told me." Howard turned a page calmly. "I'm afraid it is, Vanessa. It has been since December of 2021, 4 years and 3 months ago." The room exhaled. A few guests looked at each other. The Hartwell mother set her fork down very carefully on the rim of her plate. My mother said, "Howard, that document is invalid. Gerald wasn't in his right mind." Howard turned to a different tab. "Diane, I expected you might say that. So I want to address it directly, with the room as witnesses." He took out a second stapled document. This is the capacity attestation, signed on December 14th, 2021, by Dr. James Halloran, retired surgeon of Saratoga Springs, and Walter Pinsky, retired senior engineer at General Electric Schenectady. Both men sat with your husband for 2 hours. Both men confirmed his cognitive clarity. Both men are alive and willing to provide sworn testimony if challenged. I spoke with Dr. Halloran by phone last week. He is available on 24 hours' notice. My mother sat back hard. The chair scraped on the wood. Howard reached into the portfolio again. He took out a small black Bluetooth speaker. He set it on the head table beside the trust document. He took out his phone. He spoke to the room. On May 11th of 2022, 1 month after Gerald Sharp's funeral, Diane Sharp visited my office without an appointment. She asked me to destroy this trust document. I declined and documented the conversation. 4 days later, on May 15th, 2022, she left a voicemail on my firm's main line. That voicemail is preserved on our phone system. I'm going to play it now. He pressed play. My mother's voice came through the speaker. 4 years younger, brisk, almost cheerful. Howard, this is Diane Sharp. I need you to destroy that updated document. It will tear the family apart. Gerald wasn't thinking clearly when he made it. Please, just destroy it. Call me back. The voicemail ended. The ballroom was completely silent. Howard pressed play again. The voicemail repeated. My mother's hand was clenched on her pearl necklace. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth. Loud, sharp gasp. Howard played it a third time. By the third playing, the Hartwell mother had risen from her chair. She was looking at her son. Her face was very still. Caleb was looking at the floor. Howard let the voicemail finish for the third time. He turned off the speaker. He returned his phone to his inside pocket. He spoke once more. Asking an attorney to destroy a duly executed trust document is a serious matter. It constitutes solicitation under New York penal law. I have preserved the request, the voicemail, and my contemporaneous notes. I will be making them available to the Albany County District Attorney's Office for review on Monday morning. He paused. There is one more matter. I have also located the licensed appraiser who was engaged in August of last year to value the lake property at Lake Champlain. The appraisal was commissioned by Diane Sharp. The appraisal was used to support a contributed asset declaration in a marital agreement. Diane Sharp is not, has never been, and will never be the owner of that property. The use of that appraisal in any contract is misrepresentation. The Hartwell mother walked to Vanessa's place sitting at the head table. She picked up the small leather seating folio that had been resting beside Vanessa's plate. I watched her open it. I watched her find what she was looking for. She pulled a stapled document out of the folio, the contributed assets declaration from the side agreement. Vanessa had kept her copy with her place card to show her cousins later. The Hartwell mother held it up briefly. She read the relevant section to herself. Her jaw moved once. She turned to Caleb. She said one sentence, calmly, loud enough for the head table to hear. We'll need to discuss this, at home, tonight. She took Caleb by the elbow. The Hartwell father stood. He buttoned his suit jacket. The three of them walked out of the ballroom through the main doors. My mother sat down hard in her chair. The chair scraped on the wood floor again. Vanessa was crying, loud, ugly crying, the kind she had never practiced in a mirror. Her ivory satin train was bunched under the chair leg. Howard closed the portfolio, picked it up, walked back across the ballroom floor. As he passed my chair, he stopped. He looked at me. He nodded once. He kept walking. He exited through the main doors. If you've ever had to set a boundary so clean it ended a relationship, and felt afterward not pride, not anger, just quiet, tell me. I want to know what yours was. I stood up. I picked up my coat from the back of my chair. I walked out of the ballroom without looking at anyone. I drove the 3 hours from Cooperstown to Lake Champlain that night. The highway was empty. I passed 3 trucks and a state trooper. I didn't turn on the radio. My phone buzzed in the passenger seat. I let it buzz. I turned it face down at the next gas station. I arrived at the lake house at 11:30. I turned on the porch light, unlocked the door, walked inside. The house was cold. I lit the wood stove. I pulled my father's old wool blanket from the closet and wrapped it around my shoulders. I made tea. I did not eat. I sat down on the floor in front of the fire. I opened my leather notebook, the brass key on its leather fob. The letter now unfolded and read many times. I read his last paragraph aloud. To no one. To the lake. To the dock. To myself. Regina, you are the daughter who never asked for anything, so I'm asking on your behalf. Take what is yours. Build a life that is yours. And when you need me, look at the water. I'll be watching. I stayed at the lake house for 4 days. I walked the dock every morning. I drank coffee on the porch in my father's old wool blanket. I built fires. I slept 10 hours a night for 3 nights running. I did not check my phone. My mother called 14 times the first day. My sister called 8. I let the voicemails fill the inbox without listening. On the 3rd day, my cousin Marta sent one text. Caleb's family annulled. Heard it from a Hartford friend. Mom's lawyer called yours. Stay where you are. A. On Tuesday, my office in Zurich emailed. Brigitte had heard nothing about what had happened. She wrote, "Come back when you come back." I emailed her 2 sentences. "I'll be back next Monday. Thank you." Howard emailed Wednesday. The district attorney's office had received his file. They would be in touch in the coming weeks. He included no commentary. I flew back to Zurich the following Sunday. I have not spoken to my mother since. I have not spoken to my sister since. I do not plan to. On the 4th night before I left, I walked to the dock at midnight. The lake was still. The moon was a thin curve over the western shore. The water was black and quiet. I did not cry. I did not laugh. I breathed once, twice, 3 times. I spoke aloud to the water. "I'm still listening, Dad."